Well, today, the president announcing new plans for the government surveillance program that targets millions of unsuspecting Americans. The NSA collecting things like email, text messages, phone calls. The president saying he wants to change the way that data is handled, but not talking about actually ending the program. On the phone now is Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who is such an outspoken critic of the program, he filibustered over it and is suing the administration. Great to see you, Senator, or to hear you.
Yeah, glad to be with you, Gretchen.
All right, so I read your initial press release. You said that you were disappointed. What is your other reaction to the president's speech and changes?
You know, what I heard was the president saying, if you like your privacy, you can keep it. But meanwhile, he's going to keep collecting all of your data. He really didn't announce that he's going to quit collecting anything. They're going to continue to collect your phone records, your emails, your text messages, and many people think they're collecting your credit card statements, too. So that doesn't sound to me like he's really going to change. He gave a lot of sort of, I guess, rosy rhetoric about how he was going to do a better job at protecting privacy, but he didn't announce that he was going to do any less collection of our personal records. Well,
what do you make of this statement where he said that you can no longer request data to people beyond a terrorist target? So does that mean that if I am two people linked to a terrorist target, then they'll collect my data, but the third person removed, they won't?
See, I guess what I don't quite understand about it is he thinks that, well, instead of breaking the Fourth Amendment 4 times, we'll just break it 2 times. Because here's my opinion. If you are a potential terrorist and we have a warrant to go after you, I don't care if they do 20 hops, meaning they go way back into the data. They just have to keep asking for warrants, and they do it with a judicial warrant. So for him to say, oh, we're just going to keep collecting it, we're just going to collect less of it, really means they're just, you know, I'm going to continue breaking the Fourth Amendment, but I won't break it as much as I used to.
What about the FISA court ruling? Because a lot of people are calling that draconian, that we're going back to pre-9/11. Where did you fall on that before and after?
You know, I think that when it comes to a constitutional question of whether the Fourth Amendment applies, you can't have that decided in secret in the FISA court. So ultimately, we need to go to the Supreme Court to decide whether a single warrant applies to millions of Americans' phone records,
right,
or whether you'd have to individualize the warrant. You know, when we fought the Revolutionary War, that was one thing we objected to from the British soldiers. They were writing their own generalized warrants, and they were invading Americans' homes and looking for their papers to see if they paid the stamp tax. We objected to that, so we wrote the Fourth Amendment. We said it had to be specific, individualized, and that's the way warrants were supposed to be.
Right.
So many of us think it's unconstitutional to write a single warrant and not specify whose records you want.
Well, even within your own party, there's Congressman Peter King, who's been extremely critical of you. I want you to listen to this and react.
Rand Paul does not know what he's talking about, and Rand Paul is really spreading fear among the American people. To me, either he's totally uninformed or he's part of that hate America crowd that I thought are leftists in the 1960s, isn't it?
Wow. So how would you respond back to Congressman King?
I guess just to laugh and chuckle, and, you know, every person can have their opinion, but I don't think it furthers the debate very much. I think that there's a serious constitutional question here, and that's whether a single warrant can apply to millions of people. 5 of the Supreme Court justices, we think, have already indicated a willingness to review this case, to look at whether or not there was a case in the 70s called Maryland versus Smith, and it had to do with wiretaps on one individual. And the government is saying that that applies to every American in the country without naming those Americans. And I think the Supreme Court will rein this in. I cannot imagine that the Supreme Court is not going to come down harshly on the government and say, no, we cannot have this law breaking. They're already doing it to the president on the recess appointments.
Right.
I think you're going to find that this president believes the Constitution applies to him only when he thinks it applies to him. And I think he's going to find out differently when we get these to the Supreme Court.
Well, sounds like Senator Rand Paul will continue his mission and his fight. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you, Gretchen.